America's Cold Civil War. Hello, my name is Gary Axelman. I coach founders and investors on business plan ideation and execution in this world of black swan events. These are only my opinions, so take it for what it's worth. If you like what you see here, follow me on YouTube or TikTok for more content. So, America's Cold Civil War. As I've said before, I get it. There used to be this sort of an unwritten rule that you don't talk about politics in business or in your business environment. I'm sorry, but that's gone. Okay, it's like every bit of normalcy that the World War II generation left us, we've shredded. Okay, the reality of it is as a founder, and hell, as any human being, politics is everything in your life. Politics determines whether you're going to have a job or not. Politics determines the future of your children's education, and it is. We'll talk about politics some other time. A lot more. As you know, I was a lobbyist in Washington, D.C. for a long time, so I kind of have my finger on the pulse of that game. It's all about raising money. That's it. And keeping America talking about politics 24/7 is good for the money machine. So, anyway. So let's talk about where we are as a culture, and specifically where my dear old Republican Party is. So, in order to understand where we are today, you have to go back in time to the end of the Civil War. President Lincoln wanted more than anything to reunite the country back to what it was before the Civil War. And on the surface it looked like it worked, but it didn't. If you listen to, there's a country music song from back in the 90s, a group called Shenandoah. You listen to that song, Sunday in the South. There's a line in there that says they can smell the power burning, and they probably always will. You go over to Hank Williams Jr. back, I think it was in the late 70s, maybe early 80s. He had a song, "If the South would have won, we'd have had it made." I mean, this thing's been burning for a long time, okay? And the root of it is cultural narcissism, hate. I don't want to sound like I'm naive here. When I say this, I really underestimated the power of hate. I really underestimated how valuable hate was in raising money and driving elections. I guess I was naive. Another little naivete that I had was I didn't understand what the Southern strategy was, but we'll get there in a minute. So, where the Republican Party is today can track its roots back to 1948. The Democrat primary in 1948, Strom Thurmond and a group of Southern Democrats came after Harry Truman in the primary, wanted to primary him from the right. Strom Thurmond had created a group called the Dixiecrats, and they were referred to as the alt-right. What the connotation of the word right is, I don't know, whether that's right of center or whether that is they were right. I wasn't there, don't know. Basically, the Dixiecrat Party was upset with Truman because he intended to extend a lot of the GI Bill ramifications to both white as well as black returning soldiers. Veterans from World War II, and the Dixiecrats were pissed about that, and they took exception to it. So the next step forward, so to back up, so eventually the Democrat Party coalesced behind Truman, and Truman went on to, as we know, to be elected as president. on his own, not as an appointed president, but he actually won an election in 1948, which then we jump forward to November 22nd, 1963, which was the death of JFK. What that did was that opened the door to the LBJ presidency. And LBJ, I watched a special a long time ago about LBJ, and there was an interesting thing about him. You know, a lot of people don't realize he was a school teacher down in South Central Texas in the Flint Hills, and or in the foothills, excuse me, not Flint Hills, in the foothills in Texas. And he said that one of the things that really shook him to the core as a teacher was he would see young, in this particular case, little Mexican kids coming into school as kindergartners, laughing, giggling, chattering, and he said, you know, by the time they got to middle school or high school, they were mean. Life had made them mean. The world had made them mean. Now, you know, I found that comment to be really profound from LBJ. It shows a lot of his deepness. But as we know, he was this really conflicted human being when it comes to principles and character, but that's a conversation for another story. So why we bring up the LBJ concept or comment is, and then you jump forward to July 2, 1964. LBJ really considered civil rights like that was the mound that he was going to die on, as far as he was concerned. And so he passed the first of a series of civil rights legislation. But July 2, 1964, he was standing in the Rose Garden, or sitting in the Rose Garden for the signing ceremony, and he looked at his then, I believe it was speechwriter or press secretary, whatever, Bill Moyers, and said, I fear we've lost the South for a generation by signing that civil rights legislation. And oh my, how profound it was. That statement, wow. It was more than a generation, obviously, and we didn't realize it at the time. So then you jump forward to April 1st, 1967. Reagan, speaking to the California General Assembly, he, for the very first time, referred to the Republican Party as the Big Tent Party. And you know, I was born and raised a Reagan Republican. I was actually born and raised more of a Goldwater Republican without the racial connotation to it. Very much a Christian conservative. Okay, that is the core of who I am as a person and how I was raised. But as time has gone by, I've learned that, you know, Reagan, as much of a god as he is in the Republican Party, he left a lot of toxicity in his wake, and one of them was to roll out this Big Tent Party idea. It was cynical. It was truly a cynical plan on his part. It was all about winning. It was about stealing from the Democrat Party voters that were on the fence. So who were those voters that were on the fence? Who were those voters that Reagan was trying to swoon? They were the Dixiecrats, and he knew that. Now, the Southern strategy actually started in 1968 with Nixon, but it was really not discussed. It was there. It was in motion. It put him in office, definitely. He reached out to the South, and it paid back big dividends for him. Which is why, when you look to August 26, 1968, the Democrat convention in Chicago, you saw chaos break out. And what that was that fracturing of the Democrat Party. That was the Dixiecrat movement trying to redeem the Democrat Party. They really didn't want to go over to the Republican Party. There was this civil war going on within the Democrat Party, and it erupted there, and we saw it. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I believe it was Dan Rather was on the floor of the convention and was getting shoved around. It's quite an interesting and compelling thing to see. So to jump forward, so then we get into the 70s, and after the Nixon fiasco, and Ford, probably shouldn't have pardoned Nixon, but he wanted to be magnanimous in the same way that Lincoln had been magnanimous after the Civil War. It screwed him, whatever, that's neither here nor there. But we put Jimmy Carter in office in 1976, and what was really interesting is Jimmy Carter kind of represented the last of the old South Democrat regime, the breaking apart, the Civil War going on within the Democrat Party. And in a lot of ways, you could say that Jimmy Carter kind of drove the spike into the heart of the last of the old South Democrat Party. And he created the Department of Education, which he looked at it and says, we have to have an education system that educates everybody. It can't be about God and only God. We have Muslim children, we have children from all different walks of life now in America. We have to have an all encompassing Department of Education. Pissed the Southern Dixiecrats off when he took prayer out of school, and they've never forgiven him for it. There's a lot of people that point back at these moments in history and go, that's that's when America changed. And you know what, it's been a slow and progressive change. I'm pointing out some bullet point here as well. I'm not saying that these are all the only ones that started the change in the Republican Party. Same way as a nation, you can't just point at Carter starting the Department of Education and saying that's when the nation went bad. It's been a slow burning. Okay, so November 4, 1980, Reagan was elected president, and it was really that was a rejection of Carter. It was a rejection by the Southern Dixiecrats of where they felt the Democrat Party was going, that they didn't want to be a part of. And so the evangelicals abandoned the Democrat Party and moved over to the Republican Party, and that changed the election in 1980. So then you jump forward. Now, I've always wondered, when was the moment that the Dixiecrat Party decided that this was it? This is where they were going to die on the vine, so to speak. Newt Gingrich came into Washington, D.C. in 1994. Yeah. So Bill Clinton was elected in 1992. He was the first post-Dixiecrat Democrat. He was, part of this progressive Democrat movement. They sort of went big tent party on their own, although they went in a totally different direction. So then Newt Gingrich comes in to office, and in July of 1994, Newt Gingrich started the departure from enlightenment, so to speak, and killing, I believe the department was called the Department of Science and Technology. It was basically, they wrote white papers to educate members of the House and the Senate on how technology was changing. And I didn't realize it at the time, but that did begin sort of the dumbing down of America. I know they being like Gingrich would like to point at the Department of Education and say that's caused the dumbing down of America, but I actually think it was the reverse of that, which was the rejection of the Department of Education sort of started the dumbing down of America. Midterms, November 8, 1994, Newt Gingrich took full control of the House for the first time, I think, in 40 years. This was an all-out rejection of the old Southern Democrat movement. I mean, you have to look at it, Gingrich and several other people, Joe Scarborough, people like that coming into the Republican Party in 1994. That was the Red Wave. a lot of those people who came in as Republicans in 1994, in the previous 25, 30 years of their lives, 40 years of their lives, they were probably more Southern Democrats than Republicans, but this was part of the morphing of the party. So then we jump forward to September 11, 2001. I contend that September 11, 2001 is probably the beginning of the major paradigm shifts in our world, and is probably, as time goes by, we will probably realize just how big of a deal that was. It was sort of a Hegelian dialectic moment. It was sort of, this was the problem that the Dixiecrat Party had been looking for, to coalesce around something that they could champion, a cause. And this was the beginning of the them. Anyone who was them, anyone who was not rich, white, and Christian was considered them. And it became kind of a catch-all. Anyone who was not rich, white, and Christian was considered an enemy of the state pretty quickly after that. To roll that forward a little bit, if you go to 2007, John McCain, I believe he was in Utah or Idaho, don't remember, he was at a town hall and a woman got up and she grabbed the microphone, an older woman, and she says, "I don't trust that Obama. He's a Muslim or Arab or whatever," something derogatory, and McCain grabbed the microphone and says, "No ma'am, no ma'am, he's just somebody that I happen to disagree with." I didn't realize at that moment that was the Dixiecrat Party sort of making their moves, sort of making their entrance into mainstream politics. But there it was. January 21st, 2010, the Supreme Court rules on Citizens United. This really, while it's apart from the Dixiecrat movement, it sort of is the foundational kind of financial coalescing, because this allowed very, very wealthy men, regardless of whether they were Republicans or not, who identified with the Christian movement, to put their money behind American politics and start pushing. Now, some people might say, well, that was a good thing. But I don't really feel comfortable living in a world where it is assumed that just because someone is rich that they're smart. I know a lot of rich people are dumber than a box of rocks and just got rich out of dumb luck, but that's life. But when those people with money start using that wealth to change the tone of the culture for everybody, I get uncomfortable about that. And what Citizens United really was sort of tapping into the 2000 election with the hanging chads. I can tell you from my time that I spent in Washington, D.C., where the wealth that backs politics saw that was, it's cheaper to affect a dozen two dozen justices across, district, federal, national, law or law system. It was easier for them to affect just a handful of justices than it was to go out and try to affect entire elections, I guess. So that was kind of a driving force behind Citizens United. From there, you jump forward to March 21st, 2010. That was the creation of the Affordable Care Act. And, as far as the Dixiecrat Party was concerned, this was Tea Party moments. But that was it, because this actually leaps all the way back to 1948 with the GI Bill. There very much was this feeling that, why should we take money from rich white people and give it to poor black people to keep them healthy and alive? We don't agree with their lifestyles. Their lifestyle's what's killing them, so why should we have to pay for their health care? I heard that argument when I was in D.C., and it really kind of... I'm not saying I'm a fan of socialized health care, but the argument was a little bit raw for me. I consider myself kind of an enlightened individual, so to hear people actually say, why should we pay to keep someone alive, I was fascinated by that. As a Christian, I was like, gee, that doesn't really square with my Christian roots. So now, May 1, 2011 was the press club dinner in Washington, D.C., and Barack Obama roasted Donald Trump that night. And if you go watch the video of it, you can Google it, press club dinner 2011. You can see that Trump was deeply affected, but you also need to look around at who was sitting around Trump. Rick Scott from Florida, Republican, was actually sitting at his table. You can see that Rick Scott was put out by it. People didn't realize that that I think was the beginning of the new Civil War that night. To be honest, I think Obama overstepped, to be brutally honest. And, the pendulum of politics swings back and forth from one extreme to the next. The problem is that we are now to the point where after that press club dinner and Trump really ratcheted up the rhetoric, we have now elevated this hyperbolic us-them thing to a level that's unsustainable. The Democrat Party, swung way too far left. Okay, I've never subscribed to hardly any of their principles as a party, but I'm not here to throw them under the bus. But I can tell you they went way too far. To kind of jump forward a few years, a couple years ago, I was in Kansas City on the plaza. One day I was sitting out in front of a restaurant in my vehicle checking my phone. I look up and I see a guy walking towards me with a mustache, with red lipstick on, his hair pulled back in a hair bun, he had a midriff crop top on, pair of jeans, fingernails were painted, and he saw me, and apparently I must have had a ghastly look on my face of what the fuck, and he gave me the bird. And I sat there and I thought to myself, well, this movement isn't long-lived. And that's really what we see here is that, you cannot just point at the Republican Party and throw all blame at them, okay? And I'm just as blind and dumb as the next guy. I didn't understand what Southern strategy was. And if you go back, you look at, Paul Manafort, Roger Stone, Lee Atwater. These were all members of the Nixon administration in '72, or from '68 to '72 or whatever. Excuse me, from '68 to '72. We got to cut that out anyway. So now to jump forward. So in my opinion, I think the first shot fired in the Civil War was October 9, 2016, with the Clinton Trump debate. Looking back in time, I now realize that was a major inflection point in America, and so here we are. I've tried to provide a little bit of written context for some of this. For a long time, from 2015 on to about 2018, I went through a really, really hard time because politics was really the end game for me. That was the goal. I wanted to run for national level politics, maybe governor, or congressman, or senator at some point. And I just had to accept the fact that I really had a blind spot when it came to the Southern strategy, what Lee Atwater had created in 1988 and moved forward. He had really rolled out the Southern strategy in earnest during the Bush 41 1988 campaign. I didn't understand how important that was. And I kind of went through, I wouldn't say an identity crisis. I didn't realize that I should have been pissed off instead of shocked. I guess I wish I would have just told a whole lot more people to fuck off when I was in D.C. And you know, the pain for all of this for me is that the gaslighting. You know, we're in a situation now where you know, the Dixiecrats knew that they could not create a party on their own. Okay, they knew that they could not create a party on their own because of their baggage. So when Reagan announces the Big Tent Party, that was sort of the on-ramp, so to speak, to allow that Dixiecrat movement into the Republican Party. And the Dixiecrat Party has now evolved and morphed itself into MAGA, Make America Great Again. And I mean, from a marketing and lobbying perspective, who doesn't want to see Make America Great Again? The problem I have with that is the word again. We are a great country. The only place that we aren't great is in our minds. But keeping us divided and us against them and feeling like we're not great in our minds is financially beneficial to raising money for politicians. So we're stuck. We're stuck in a death spiral. There's nothing wrong with America. America, when you get out in the middle of a country, you talk to people, we're all the same. We're just trying to raise a family and do our thing and maybe get a little ahead. The problem that I have with where we are right now is, well, to go back to 2015, 16, 17, 18, is the gaslighting is they use the word rhino to be anybody that they don't perceive as them. So this is like taking the us against them thing down to a really granular level, which is, you know, if you don't believe in our movement, if you don't believe in our rich white Christian values, then you're one of them. You're a rhino, a Republican in name only. And so that's why you saw people like Jeff Flake and myself, and you know, I'm not saying I'm all that important, but a lot of people like me who are the old school Christian conservatives, we said, you know, we don't want to be a part of this. And it's not, honestly, it wasn't even about quitting. It was about we knew we weren't welcome anymore. I was made aware of that my views and my positions in Washington, D.C. were not welcome. That they were contrary to where the Dixiecrat movement was going. You know, free markets, consumer advocacy, all of those things. No. We are now about money. We are now about pure and simple money. And you know, it was kind of a heartbreaker for me. I will tell you a very private, personal moment that happened to me that I think, looking back, was probably the biggest inflection point for me in D.C. was I had a representative for a wealthy individual reach out to me in kind of a clandestine, sly way, and it kind of made me uncomfortable right from the beginning. But you know, I was trying to run a super PAC. I needed to raise some money. The person said, "Hey, we'd love to give you some money for your super PAC." And I said, "To do what?" And they said, "Well, we want to give you a couple $1,000,000, and we're going to give you a list of people that, you know, we want you to hire private detectives and go out and do Oppo research on." And I went, no, I gotta go. And that, looking back, had a lot to do with me leaving DC. And it breaks my heart because I do feel like a quitter sometimes. But, you know, my life is pretty freaking important to me. And that period in time politically happened to correspond with me getting sick. So it was sort of like this confluence of moments in my life where I went, you know, my life's too important. I don't need to put up with this crap. And I left. And so I hope this tutorial is of some value to you, and have a good day.